Okay, folks, here is an image of the periodic table. As of the time where I recorded this video, there were 118 elements in existence, many of which we have familiarity with in terms of like our everyday experience. But some of these elements really only exist in labs when scientists create them, and then they'll very quickly kind of disintegrate. What are some elements that you are familiar with? So let's point a few out. You are all likely familiar with hydrogen. You're likely familiar with helium. I bet you've heard of oxygen. Likely you've heard of iron. Silver. And sodium. These are just a few examples of elements that you are likely familiar with coming into this class. Let's talk a bit more in detail about the periodic table because it can be incredibly helpful. Let's start with the overall structure of the periodic table, okay? So I want you to take a moment and look at these individual squares within the periodic table. You can see that each of these squares has a number associated with it. This is called the atomic number, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. You'll also see that there are either one or two letters associated with these elements. And these letters symbolize the name of the element. It's an abbreviation that we as chemists use pretty frequently. And you can see that as we go from left, where hydrogen is, to right, where helium is, the numbers increase. So 1 is on the left and 2 is all the way on the right. Then when we move down a row, we go 3, 4, and then again a big jump to 5, 6, etc. So kind of moving left to right and up, down, we move up in number. Now when we look at the periodic table, and we'll talk about this more next time we are together, it is going to be important to think about kind of the rows and the columns of the periodic table. So we have the group number, defined from left to right. So for example, we would say that hydrogen is in group 1, and oxygen, for example, is in group 16. We also have periods. This is moving from top to bottom in the periodic table. So again, hydrogen is in period 1, where, for example, potassium here is in period 4. And so we can think about the periodic table both kind of from left to right in groups, which are the columns of the periodic table, but also we can think about the periodic table in terms of periods, which are the rows. Finally, folks, let's talk a little bit about atomic number in this video. So atomic number tells us the number of protons in the nucleus and an element is distinguished by the number of protons it contains in its nucleus. So each element has a different number of protons. So the atomic number really determines, spelling is challenging, so the number of protons determines which element we're talking about here. The atomic number tells us the number of protons and tells us which element. So for example, hydrogen, atomic number 1, has 1 proton in its nucleus. And that tells us, yes, it must be hydrogen. And that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll talk a little bit about the different parts of the periodic table and kind of how we can think about various chunks.